Nestled in the picturesque streets of Santa Monica, a house once brimming with the youthful exuberance of Shirley Temple, the beloved child star of the 1930s, now exudes an unsettling air of mystery. Known for its colonial charm and manicured gardens, the property carries a shadow of its vibrant past, a shadow that grows darker with every unexplained event. Shirley Temple moved into this home during the height of her fame. It was a sanctuary, filled with laughter, song, and the chatter of Hollywood's golden age. But over the years, as new owners took residence, reports of inexplicable phenomena began to surface. One of the earliest accounts came from a family who purchased the house in the 1980s. They spoke of hearing faint but unmistakable sounds of tiny footsteps running through the halls late at night. At first, they attributed it to the creaks of an old house, but as the occurrences became more frequent and distinct, they realized something was amiss. Visitors to the house often report an eerie sensation of being watched. On more than one occasion, unsuspecting guests claimed to hear the distant laughter of children echoing through the empty corridors. The sound is described as soft and melodic, yet hauntingly unnatural, as though it emanates from nowhere and everywhere all at once. A babysitter hired by one of the families living in the house quit abruptly after just one evening. She described hearing a child's laughter coming from the upstairs nursery. When she went to investigate, she found the room empty, the rocking chair gently swaying as if someone had just left it. Another peculiar feature of the haunting involves sudden flashes of light. These bursts are neither blinding nor consistent but occur unpredictably in the middle of the night. Homeowners describe waking to find their bedrooms illuminated momentarily, with no apparent source. Neighbors, too, have occasionally witnessed these strange flickers from the street, casting brief, ghostly silhouettes in the windows. In one particularly chilling instance, a couple living in the house woke to find every light in the home switched on simultaneously despite having turned them all off before going to bed. Security cameras later revealed no signs of intrusion, leaving the couple with no explanation other than the supernatural. Many believe that Shirley Temple's home has retained the energy of her extraordinary childhood. Some suggest it is her youthful spirit that continues to dance through the halls, unwilling to leave the place where she felt most free and joyful. Others argue that the house has become a magnet for residual energy, a phenomenon often linked to places imbued with intense emotion or history. Skeptics dismiss these stories as overactive imaginations fueled by Shirley Temple's fame and legacy. Yet, as the accounts accumulate and the details remain consistent across generations, even the most doubtful find themselves uneasy within its walls. The Shirley Temple House in Santa Monica stands as a peculiar landmark, a blend of Hollywood nostalgia and chilling mystery. Those who visit often leave with a newfound respect for the unknown, whispering about the possibility that not all chapters of a star's life end with the final curtain call. Whether a skeptic or believer, one thing is certain. This house, much like its former occupant, continues to captivate the world in ways no one can fully explain. In the summer of 2003, a young couple moved into the house, drawn by its historical charm and storied past. They were skeptical of the paranormal rumors but charmed by the idea of living in a home tied to such a legendary figure. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal if not a little too quiet. It wasn't until they began renovating the old nursery, intending to turn it into a home office, that the disturbances began. On the second night of renovations, the couple awoke to a sound they couldn't place. A rhythmic tapping, soft yet persistent, echoed through the house. When they traced the noise to the nursery, they found the freshly painted walls streaked with what appeared to be tiny handprints, faint but undeniable. The paint had dried hours before, yet the handprints seemed to be pressed into the surface as though they had just appeared. Shaken, they tried to dismiss the incident. But as the weeks went on, their dog, normally calm and friendly, began refusing to enter certain rooms, growling at empty corners of the nursery. Then came the laughter. Late one evening, while sorting through old boxes left by the previous owners, the wife stumbled upon a yellowed photograph. It showed a young Shirley Temple standing on the front porch, her iconic dimples flashing in the sunlight. But what drew her attention wasn't Shirley, it was the faint outline of another figure in the upstairs window, a silhouette too tall to be a child. Later that night, the husband woke to find his wife standing in the hallway outside their bedroom, staring at the staircase. When he called to her, she didn't respond, her gaze fixed downward. Following her line of sight, he saw it. A faint outline of someone standing halfway down the stairs. It wasn't a child this time, it was a shadowy figure of indeterminate age, featureless yet oppressive in presence. As quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving the couple to question whether they'd seen it at all. But the unease lingered, and they couldn't shake the feeling that the house wasn't just haunted by the echoes of childhood laughter, it was hiding something far older and darker. Something connected to the figure in the photograph. Determined to uncover the truth, the couple decided to investigate the house's history. What they found was a chilling detail that had gone unnoticed for decades. The house's original owner had sealed off a small storage room during renovations in the 1940s. No record existed of why it was bricked up, but when the couple found the faint outline of a door hidden behind a large bookshelf in the study, they felt an overwhelming compulsion to uncover what lay behind it. Despite their growing fear, they hired a contractor to remove the bricks. The process was slow, each blow of the hammer reverberating through the house as if the walls themselves were protesting. By the time they broke through, night had fallen, casting long shadows over the room. Inside, they found the contractor's flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the sealed room, illuminating a space that seemed untouched for decades. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling with every step. The room was small, barely larger than a closet, its walls lined with faded wallpaper depicting cheerful, dancing children. The sight was unsettling in its own right, but it was what sat in the center of the room that truly froze them in place. A tiny wooden rocking chair, its paint chipped and aged, facing the wall. The chair creaked, ever so slightly, as though nudged by an unseen hand. The contractor stepped back, muttering something about the draft, but the couple remained rooted in place. The wife finally stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the chair. Before she could touch it, the chair stopped rocking, dead still. Behind it, faint but visible, was another set of small handprints smudged on the wall, almost identical to those that had appeared in the nursery. That night, the couple barely slept. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, every shadow stretched and unnatural. The wife, unable to shake her unease, lay awake staring at the ceiling, when she heard it faint, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. A voice, high-pitched and childlike, whispering her name. Her breath caught in her throat as she nudged her husband awake, but by the time he stirred, the whispering had stopped. He dismissed it as a bad dream, but she was certain it wasn't. And when she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, she dreamed of the room, the rocking chair, and a darkened figure standing silently in the corner, watching her. The next morning, while sorting through the scattered bricks from the sealed room, the husband found an old, rusted key tucked between the debris. It didn't match any of the doors in the house, but it felt strangely heavy in his hand, as though carrying a significance he couldn't explain. That evening, curious and restless, he tried the key in the locks of the old wardrobes and cabinets throughout the house, all without success. Frustrated, he placed it on the kitchen counter and went to bed, determined to investigate further the next day. When they awoke, the key was gone. Convinced that one of them had moved it absent-mindedly, they searched the house from top to bottom. It was only later, when the wife entered the nursery to retrieve her phone, that she found the key balanced precariously on the armrest of the rocking chair. Neither of them had placed it there. Desperate for answers, the couple reached out to a former owner of the house, an elderly woman who had lived there during the 1960s. When they mentioned the sealed room and the handprints, her voice grew quiet. "You shouldn't have opened it," she said, her tone grave. "That room was closed for a reason." She refused to elaborate further, hanging up abruptly, but not before giving one final warning. "If you've started hearing them, don't answer." The couple exchanged uneasy glances, her words heavy with implication. Hearing what? They didn't have to wait long to find out. That night, as they sat in the living room, the sound of faint knocking echoed through the house, not at the door, but from within the walls themselves. It started softly, almost tentative, then grew louder and more insistent. And then came the laughter. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The laughter began softly, an eerie, childlike giggle that echoed through the house. At first, it seemed to come from the nursery, but as the couple strained to listen, the sound seemed to move, weaving through the walls, growing louder and more disjointed. The husband grabbed a flashlight and motioned for his wife to stay in the living room while he investigated. She didn't argue. As he made his way toward the nursery, the laughter abruptly stopped. The silence was worse. It was as though the house itself was holding its breath. He stepped into the nursery, the air feeling colder, heavier. The rocking chair sat motionless in the middle of the room, but the key was no longer on the armrest. He turned to leave when he heard it, a faint scratching sound, coming from inside the closet. His pulse quickened as he approached the closet door, every step feeling like an eternity. When he reached out to open it, the scratching stopped. Slowly, he turned the knob, the door creaking open to reveal nothing. The closet was empty, save for a few old hangers swaying gently as if they'd been disturbed. But as he turned away, something caught his eye, a small piece of paper wedged into the corner of the closet floor. He knelt to pick it up, finding a fragment of aged, yellowed stationery. Written in a child's uneven scrawl were 3 chilling words: "Don't wake her." His stomach turned as he showed the note to his wife. Neither of them could make sense of it, but the words burrowed into their minds, an ominous warning they couldn't ignore. That night, they tried to sleep, leaving every light in the house on. But just past midnight, the wife woke to the sound of something heavy being dragged across the nursery floor. She shook her husband awake, and together they crept down the hallway, the dragging sound growing louder with each step. When they reached the nursery, the rocking chair was no longer in the middle of the room. It had been moved to the corner facing the wall. Sitting on the seat was the key, and on the wall above it, drawn in a child's hand, was the faint outline of a door that wasn't there before. The couple stared, frozen. The husband reached out to touch the outline, and the moment his fingers grazed the wall, a sound erupted, a guttural, choking gasp, as if someone had taken their first breath in years. The wall felt warm, almost alive, and he jerked his hand back in shock. Behind them, the bedroom door slammed shut. The wife screamed as the temperature in the room plummeted. The dragging sound returned, louder this time, echoing all around them. The husband grabbed the key from the rocking chair and pulled his wife toward the door, but it wouldn't budge, as if something was holding it shut. And then, in the silence that followed, a voice, faint and cold, whispered from the shadows, "She's almost here." The voice hung in the air like a fog, cold and suffocating. The husband rattled the nursery door, but it remained firmly locked. Behind them, the outline of the mysterious door on the wall seemed to shimmer, its edges faintly glowing, as though it were alive. "What does it mean?" the wife whispered, clutching his arm. "Who's coming?" Before he could answer, the rocking chair in the corner began to creak, its movements slow and deliberate, as if an invisible weight had settled into it. The husband's grip tightened around the key, its cold surface pressing into his palm. "Let's just get out," he said, his voice shaking. But as they turned toward the window, the outline of the door shifted. Slowly, impossibly, the wall began to ripple like the surface of water. With an audible groan, the wall peeled back, revealing a dark void beyond. It wasn't a room, at least not one they could recognize. The space was endless, filled with faint whispers and distant, flickering lights. For a moment, neither of them could move, transfixed by the otherworldly sight. And then they saw her. A small figure emerged from the darkness, stepping forward with halting, unnatural movements. Her face was shrouded in shadow, but the outline of her curls and the way she held her arms were eerily familiar. She stopped just inside the threshold of the doorway, her head tilting slowly to one side. "Why did you wake me?" The voice was childlike but layered, as though multiple voices were speaking at once. The wife stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. "What do you want?" she managed to whisper. The girl raised a hand, pointing toward the husband. "It's not me you should be afraid of," she said. "It's her." The room suddenly went dark, And when the lights flickered back on, the void was gone, replaced by the solid wall as if it had never opened. But the air in the room was different, thicker, heavier, carrying the faint scent of old wood and roses. On the floor where the rocking chair had been, there was now an ornate wooden chest, its surface etched with strange symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. "Where did that come from?" the wife asked, her voice trembling. The husband knelt beside the chest, the key in his hand seemingly vibrating with anticipation. It fit perfectly into the chest's rusted lock, as though it had been waiting for this moment. "Don't," his wife pleaded, but he couldn't stop himself. The key turned with a sharp click, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a single item. A doll, its porcelain face cracked and one glass eye missing. Its tiny dress was identical to the one Shirley Temple had worn in one of her most famous films, but the doll's expression was twisted into a macabre grin. As they stared in horror, the doll's head slowly turned toward them, and its mouth opened. A low, guttural hum filled the room, and the doll's voice emerged whispered words, indecipherable at first but growing louder and clearer with every second. "She knows you're here." Before they could react, the nursery door burst open, slamming against the wall with such force that the hinges splintered. From somewhere deeper in the house, the sound of footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably approaching. The wife grabbed her husband's arm, pulling him toward the doorway. "We have to leave. Now!" But as they stepped into the hallway, the lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness came the laughter again, louder now, surrounding them, drowning out all thought. The last thing they saw before the lights went out completely was a shadow moving at the far end of the hallway, impossibly tall and wearing the unmistakable outline of a wide-brimmed hat. The laughter rose to a crescendo, the walls trembling as if alive. The shadow at the end of the hallway grew closer, its form shifting unnaturally with each step. The wife clung to her husband, her eyes wide with terror, as the shadow's wide-brimmed hat became clearer, its edges razor-sharp against the dim flicker of the dying lights. "Run!" the husband yelled, pulling her down the hallway. They stumbled into the living room, where the air felt thick, almost gelatinous, slowing their movements. The sound of footsteps followed, heavy and deliberate, echoing far too loudly for the shadow's slight form. The wife turned, catching a glimpse of its face, or what should have been a face. Instead, there was nothing but a swirling void, a hollow blackness that seemed to suck the light from the room. The figure stopped at the edge of the living room, tilting its head in an almost curious manner. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so oppressive it felt deafening. And then it spoke. "You woke her," it said, its voice deep and resonant, layered with countless whispers. "And now you belong to us." The husband grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and hurled it at the figure. It passed through the shadow without resistance, clattering uselessly to the floor. "This is our house," the wife screamed, though her voice faltered. "You can't have us." The figure's head tilted further, almost to an impossible angle. "Your house," it said. "No, this has always been hers." It raised one shadowy hand, pointing toward the nursery. The couple turned, and to their horror, they saw the small girl standing in the hallway. Her face was still obscured in shadow, but her presence was undeniable. "You shouldn't have opened the door," she whispered. Behind her, the wall where the outline of the door had been shimmered again. This time it didn't ripple. It opened fully, revealing the dark void beyond. From the depths, dozens of small hands reached out, clawing at the edges, their movements desperate and jerky. The husband grabbed his wife's hand, dragging her toward the front door. The girl's voice followed them, calm and cold. "You can't leave. You're already part of the house." The couple reached the door, and to their relief it swung open. They bolted into the night, their feet pounding on the pavement as they ran. When they finally reached the street, they turned back to look at the house. It stood silent and still, its windows dark and unassuming, as though nothing had happened. The oppressive energy was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. Breathing heavily, They stared at the nursery window. The girl was there, standing motionless, her face now fully visible. It was Shirley Temple, or at least something that looked like her. But her expression wasn't the cheerful smile the world remembered. Her eyes were cold, her grin sinister. The couple never returned to the house. They sold it to a distant buyer who didn't ask too many questions. But strange things continued to happen. Neighbors occasionally reported hearing laughter late at night or seeing lights flicker in the nursery. A few claimed to see a shadowy figure in the window, always wearing a wide-brimmed hat. The couple moved across the country, but the husband began waking in the middle of the night, hearing faint whispers. The wife caught glimpses of small handprints on their bathroom mirror. And every year on the same night, no matter where they lived, a package would arrive at their doorstep. Inside, always the same thing. A doll with a cracked porcelain face, one glass eye, and a sinister grin. The house may have let them go, but it never truly let them leave. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.